What is good, RIZZLE fam? It is your boy, Big Man. We finally got some updates about Suge Knight and the life he's forced to live behind bars. If you thought that Suge was keeping 100 and still keeping the same attitude as he did while he was out running the streets, well, prepare to be surprised. After hearing a few comments coming in from an inmate who's a former Piru Blood gang leader, we realized that Suge changed his ways, and he's even scared of leaving his own cell. Here's what's up. Y'all already know quite well who the big bad Suge Knight is. He's a former prominent record label owner from the 1990s, and he was widely known for his notoriety. Despite being sentenced to nearly 30 years in prison, Knight had previously managed several significant hip-hop artists, including Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and the late Tupac Shakur. To be a little bit more precise, Suge Knight's been sentenced to 28 years in prison after pleading no contest to voluntary manslaughter for an incident that occurred in 2015. As the former CEO of Death Row Records, Knight was charged with murder for using his vehicle to run over two men at a restaurant parking lot in LA. The incident was recorded on surveillance video near the set of the NWA biopic Straight Outta Compton. Prosecutors claim that Knight followed the two men to a nearby burger restaurant where he ran over them with his pickup truck. There's plenty of comments online talking about the gruesome incident and how Suge Knight snatched the life of an innocent man. If Suge did this at this era, imagine what foul shit he did when Death Row was at its best. One of the men, Terry Carter, passed away due to his injuries, while the other, Clee Sloan, suffered head and foot injuries. Knight left the scene of the incident before authorities arrived. Facing the possibility of life imprisonment, Suge opted for a plea deal a few days before his trial was set to begin. According to one report, Suge Knight was also accused of second-degree robbery back in 2014 for allegedly stealing a paparazzo's camera with comedian Cat Williams. In addition, he was indicted last year for threatening Straight Outta Compton director F. Gary Gray with death or bodily harm. As you would expect, this was not Suge's first time tackling the law. Suge was previously sentenced to 9 years in prison in 1997 for violating his probation from an earlier assault charge. Although he was granted an early release in 2001, he was sent back to prison in 2003 for assaulting a parking attendant. This time around, he's probably going to stay in jail until the rest of his life. Coming to terms with the fact that he can leave a strong mark on you, and is sure as hell left a strong mark on Suge. He ain't been the same since he entered jail. I mean, Suge would be eligible for parole in October of 2034, but that's like a long way from now, and who knows if his condition's gonna stay stable until then. So what is Suge Knight's life in prison like? Well, as you can imagine, it's been a rough few years for the big guy, who's got a lot of challenges to overcome. First of all, he's located at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego County. This is a California state prison that ranges from medium to maximum security levels. While Suge Knight is currently incarcerated there, he's not the only infamous inmate at RJDCF. Other inmates include Saran, who assassinated Senator Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. The Mendez brothers, Lyle and Eric, who were convicted of murdering their parents in 1996. John Getro, a suspected international serial murderer. And Tex Watson, a member of the Charles Manson family. In 2015, Too Short actually served his sentence at the same time that Suge Knight was brought in. He even reflected on those times in an interview he did for DJ Vlad.
They put me in the little bitty cubby hole right next to Suge.
Oh, wow.
So nobody was really seeing Suge a lot then because he got locked down. It was 2015. I don't know when he went in, but you could check.
Yeah.
2015. And we had like the visit. I was there 5 weeks. I probably saw him 3 or 4 times in the visit, and we chop it up. You know, the same question. How you doing? How you doing? Like his family be visiting him and shit. And we just, you know, get a couple moments, and it was cool like that.
Suge Knight faced his first major obstacle in 2016 when he underwent emergency surgery on his appendix after suffering from severe pain. Suge endured weeks of discomfort before being unable to stand. In 2019, Suge Knight gave some clarification in regards to his connections outside of prison. He identified 3 individuals as the main people in charge of his projects, designating Ray J to handle his business dealings with Death Row before it was purchased by Snoop Dogg, and leaving his fiancée in charge of all media-related rights, such as TV and film releases about Knight. Meanwhile, TV host Nick Cannon is said to be working on a book about his life. However, that's not all. There's even more stress coming Suge's way. In March 2020, a judge approved a $107 million judgment against him. Lydia Harris, former business partner of Suge Knight, filed a lawsuit against Knight and Death Row Records. Turns out, the boys were allegedly withholding profits from the label's earlier years. Lydia claims that she was the co-founder of Death Row Records and contributed $1.5 million to the label's startup costs, but was later forced out by Suge Knight and other partners. Now she's coming back for what belongs to her. She wants over $100 million in damages and a 50% stake in the label. Due to all these problems coming Suge's way, well, it doesn't come as a big surprise that Suge don't want much to do with the world at this point. In fact, rumor has it that Suge Knight changed completely in prison. So much so that he's not even claiming Pyru in prison, even though he claimed his gang affiliation for the Pirates before he got in and was putting in work. See, there's this interview that gave us some additional info about Suge and his relationship with inmates. Turns out Suge's hella scared. He's keeping a seriously low pro. In fact, some days he's not even leaving his cell. Some say that he's just had enough of everything. One of the guys who did an interview from behind bars told us this about Suge.
Talking about Suge like that, so I was bringing up, I raised that point to show you that dudes be on these streets advocating this tough man persona. When you really be in the pit with the homies, you know what I'm saying, and you gotta really pull that knife out and get your man, then the game changed.
Right.
You see, that's what I was speaking to. I was showing them, I was trying to illustrate, based on what we talked about, me and Suge, that, hey man, you can come out.
If what the man is saying is true, Suge seems to be in PC, protective custody. That is the type of imprisonment in which an inmate is placed in a segregated unit for their own safety. This may be due to a variety of reasons, such as the inmate being at risk of harm or other inmates or staff, or the inmate having high-profile status that can make them a target. Suge Knight was reportedly placed in protective custody both because of his high-profile status and concerns for his own safety. As a former record label executive who had associations with notorious gang members, Knight was considered a high-risk inmate in a prison environment. Protective custody ensured that he was isolated from the general pop and kept under close supervision to minimize the risk of any harm being inflicted upon him. And that's not all. Seems that Suge isn't the only one who started switching sides or completely dropping the flag once he got in. Apparently, Mad Dog, a popular older member of the Rolling 60 Crips, did the exact same thing.
You know, did you know Mad Dog?
Nah. I seen him in the room, but nah, I ain't familiar with him.
Yes, he was a Crip, but he came in at the club. I exposed him because I knew him. All right, that's why I identified him immediately. Oh, it's Mad Dog from Rolling 60 Crip.
The inmate who did the interview claimed a little later during the same interview that the reason why Suge specifically decided not to mingle with the Pyrus any longer was because of fear. He thought that Suge was afraid of what might happen to him if he met up with the wrong people.
So you think he was scared to come out the cell, or he was just like he didn't want to be a part of that?
Well, he had to be scared because he didn't come over here with us.
Right.
You know, all the people, you know.
As you just heard, he had the opportunity to be with his people, but he was still afraid. He don't want to have nothing to do with someone from the gang. That's that. If you think about it, the story kind of adds up. You never know what could happen in prison. You could run into somebody who could cause serious problems to you in a blink of an eye. There's absolutely no rules inside, and anyone could get touched. People online generally understand Suge and what he's going through. However, they don't have much sympathy for him. This guy was a walking menace, and everyone knows that he did terrible things. All the bad stuff happening to Suge right now, you can call it karma. As for an introvert myself, I can completely understand Suge because if I was in prison, I'd prefer to stay in my cell by myself all day and every day. You could write a book about the stuff Suge did to people when he was on top. He was the real-life Debo. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Then some believe that Suge is just getting older, and he's no longer willing to claim sides. He's past all that, and all he's thinking about is just making it out at this point. Suge's getting older. Doing time changes some people. In conclusion, Suge Knight's life behind bars has been marked by numerous challenges and obstacles, from health issues to legal battles and lawsuits. Despite his circumstances, Knight remains optimistic about his future and hopeful that he will one day be able to rejoin his family and loved ones. His parole eligibility is set for 2037. Knight still has a kind of long way to go, but his resilience and determination suggest that he will continue to fight for his freedom and a brighter future ahead. Some believe that he might actually make it out alive one day. But what you think? Is it possible? What's y'all's take on the situation that Suge Knight has put himself into? Think he's ever gonna make it out of prison alive? Let us know in the comments section down below. Thank y'all so much for watching to the very end. As always, remember to keep it RIZZLE.